In this lesson, you'll see some different ways you can declare and initialize an array, and you'll get some practice at working with the data items stored in an array. To begin with, I'm going to make some changes to the program you can see here. Rather than outputting each item in my array one element at a time, I'm going to build an output string and show them all at once. I'll start by getting rid of this line and this line, and I'm going to declare a string variable into which I'll collect the output. I've called it stout. I've also initialized it with a 0-length string, but that's about to change. Each time I pass through the loop, I'm going to concatenate the next data item onto this string. I'll do the output once the loop has finished. Let's take a look. Well, I have a single message with all of the fruits in it, but it's not quite what I wanted. You may remember from an earlier video, I can use a new line operator. That's more like it. What I have here then is a little routine which I can use to examine the contents of an array once I've done some work on it. But of course I could also step through the program to see what's going on inside the array. What I'd like to do now is show you a few different ways that you can declare and assign values to an array. Here I've specified an array of strings, and I've specified its size, and then I've initialized it separately. But I can actually declare and assign values to an array in one line of code, like this. I'm getting a syntax error because I've only supplied 5 items. Let's change that 10 to 5. I can declare an array of integers in the same way. In fact, if I'm specifying the data while I declare the array, I don't need to specify how big the array will be. The fact that I've specified 10 data items is all I need to say. I will get an array with 10 elements. In fact, I can even do this. Behind the scenes, these 3 lines are essentially doing the same thing, but this is the most convenient shorthand way of specifying and initializing an array. I must say though, there's something a little bit unrealistic about hard coding the data that your program is going to work with. Chances are the data which you want to put inside an array are stored in an external file or a database, or maybe you want to capture those data from the user interface. The code I've written here is fine for testing and learning about programs, but when you're writing real-world applications, you'll need some way to work with external data, and I'll say more about that another time. Now let's get a bit of practice at working with the items in an array variable. I'm going to do this using my scores array, so let's get rid of these. I have an array of 10 integers. I'm going to put a 10 here, even though I don't need to, just to make it clear that I've got 10 items in the array without having to count them by sight. I'll change my little output routine as well. Let's make sure it works. That looks fine. Notice I've used toString because I need to convert these integers into strings before I can concatenate them onto my output string. Now, suppose I want to add up all of the items in this array. I want to know what the total of all of these scores is. I'm going to do something similar to what I did when I built my output string. I've declared a regular variable called total. Now I'm going to scan the array. I'm using a variable called x as my loop counter because I've already used I somewhere else. And within the loop, I'm keeping a running total. Remember, what you can see there is shorthand for total equals total plus scores x. Once the loop is finished, I'll output the total, which needs to be converted to a string in order for messagebox.show to work with it. Those scores add up to 589. Suppose I just wanted to add up all of the items which are bigger than 50. Can you think of a way to do that? If you want to give it a go yourself, pause the video now and see what you can come up with. I'll show you my solution in just a moment. To add up all of the items bigger than 50, I simply need to test each item before I add it to my running total, using an if statement like this. All of the items over 50 add up to 469. What if you were asked to add up only the even numbers? I'll give you a clue. In an earlier video, you met the modulus operator, the percent sign. The modulus operator will give you the remainder after division. Pause the video if you want to try adding up just the even numbers, and I'll show you my solution in just a moment. To add up only the even numbers, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that any number, modulus 2, will give a result of 0 if it's an even number. You'll get a result of 1 if it's an odd number. So this is my test for evenness. If the value I'm looking at, modulus 2, is equal to 0, it's an even number. Now, before I test my program, let's just modify the data slightly so I can see if it is actually working. So there are only 2 even numbers there, and they add up to 44. That looks right. Why don't you try adding up just the odd numbers that are bigger than 50? Pause the video now to try it, and I'll show you a solution in just a moment. So, to specify just the odd numbers, all I need to change is this. And to specify that I only want the odd numbers that are bigger than 50, I'm just going to make my test a little bit more complex. I'm using a logical AND operator. So whatever's selected by this if statement must be an odd number and it must be bigger than 50. Again, let's modify the data so we can see if this is working. I just want 3 odd numbers, 2 of which are bigger than 50. "95 plus 99 is indeed 194. All of the other numbers are being ignored. Something else you might like to try is adding 1 to each odd number in the array, so we end up with nothing but even numbers. Pause now to try it, and I'll show you how I would do it in a moment. To make all of the numbers in the array even numbers, I just need to add 1 to each odd number. This is pretty straightforward. I'm not using the total variable this time, so I'm going to get rid of it. And there you have it. They're all even numbers. Next time, I'll show you how to populate an array using the data from a text file, and how to specify an array if you don't know in advance how much data you're going to be working with.